Hi there, and welcome to the Fearless Artist Podcast, where we empower classical musicians to build their own thriving careers. I'm your host, Michelle Lynn, and together with Deanna Petre, we teach artists to conquer the entrepreneurial side of their careers and create the futures they want.
We are two freelance classical musicians who have lived and worked in Europe for a decade, and together we started the Fearless Artist Mastermind, a coaching company created to teach classical musicians how to overcome fear and take action on building their dream careers.
In each episode, we will explore the intersection of artistry and entrepreneurship, teaching you the fearless mindset with practical steps and strategies to build a sustainable career.
Get ready to build your own artistic brand, find a supportive community of musicians so that you don't have to figure out everything alone, and earn a living that you deserve.
We believe that you can be a thriving artist and not a starving one, and we are redefining what it means to be a classical musician in the modern era. Hey everybody, and welcome back to the Fearless Artist Podcast. My name is Michelle Lane, your host, and today I am so excited to have a very special guest. This is our one and only podcast producer, Pokie Huang. Pokie, welcome.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for making this show possible. I mean, we have so much we're going to talk about today, but first of all, just for everybody listening, Pokie is the reason that you're listening to this episode. He is incredible. He takes all of the audio and turns it into magic and distributes it across all the platforms. And it's really thanks to you that we've been able to do this. I had it on my heart to do a podcast forever, and only thanks to you. And we'll talk about that later in the episode about being consistent with a new project, especially adding something to like a very full schedule. Like this, none of this would have happened without you. So I've had the ideas and I've brought on the guests, but you made it happen. So thank you. So why don't you introduce yourself to our audience and tell us a little bit about who you are?
Okay. I'm Pokie. I'm a pianist and I live in New York City. I have been doing podcasts for, I think, the last 2-3 years. And I also build websites for musicians. I also teach. I have a teaching studio here in New York City. So kind of doing little things here and there.
Yeah, fellow pianist. Speaking of New York, let's just go back to last week when I was there in person. So Pokie and I finally got to meet in person last week when I was in New York City for a few days. That was fun.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I was telling Michelle, I said it was kind of funny to see you in person rather than seeing through a screen.
I mean,
so, yeah, it was great.
Yeah, you have heard my voice so much over the last year. Like, it's almost like I'm a little embarrassed to think about it because you told me once that you listen to every episode like 5 times to edit it.
Well, I have to.
Yeah, you have to. But so what I mean is like you've heard me a bazillion hours. Anyway, yeah, it was so great to meet in person. I mean, we've been working together online for well over a year, and then you were coaching with me through TFA the year before that. So it's just amazing to me. Like, I will forever die on this Instagram hill. Like, it has been such an incredible place to meet musicians that become real life friends. Like, for everybody who thinks social media is fake or that, you can't meet real people. I mean, that's just been, my experience has been the opposite. And you're just another great example of that. So yeah, I got to come to New York. There was a friend of mine singing in Carnegie and I wanted to hear him and I wanted to meet you. And basically we just like ate our way through the city. It was so fun to hang out and to talk all things podcast. And the plans that we have this year, we're going to weekly episode releases. So that's really cool.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So anyway, I wanted to ask you, when you first found TFA, what was your initial impression? Why did you join? Like, what were you looking for back then?
It was interesting because I remember I found TFA. That was right before you guys start rebranding.
Yeah. Just pause here because do you remember the flower? Do you remember our old logo? Okay. So for anyone listening to this podcast, if you remember the flower, please DM me because that flower, like RIP, like we had this really colorful, amazing flower that I found on Unsplash. And that was our logo for like 2 years, 3 years. And then we decided that we needed to do a rebrand and become professional. And everyone said, kill the flower. And I was a little bit heartbroken. But I remember you told me it was because of the rebrand that you were like, oh, who are these people? Like, what's going on?
Right. I thought, whoa, what just happened?
Yeah.
And at the time, I was planning to start the website business. And we start talking and then you give us confidence where you can not only do one thing, right? Because as a pianist, that's what we learn when we're in school. Just practice, practice, practice. You're going to be okay. But actually, you're not okay. When you get out of school, I mean, how do we know anything, right? Yeah. So that was kind of one of the things that really got my attention. You talk about a lot of real life stories and we start working together.
And tell me a little bit more, like, we have our membership Fast Forward, which is a bigger community, but you went straight for the one-on-one coaching sessions, which are more expensive. Can you tell me like how you made that decision and why you wanted to invest in yourself?
So the decision was made after our initial call, right?
Mhm.
At the time, I need somebody kind of give me guidance of what I was doing. I think you also talk about this. Sometimes it's difficult to do your own thing if you
Mhm.
have a different lens to kind of show you what you're doing. So that's what I was looking for, and you kind of give me an idea what we're gonna do. Yeah, so I decided, why not go for the best, right?
Yeah, it's amazing. And I love that. And I was so honored that you went straight for the one-on-one because I love working one-on-one with people. I think that's how I can have a bigger impact. I love unlocking people and discovering, what are the limiting beliefs and how can we overcome those. I've had to do so much work on myself with fixed growth mindset. If anyone listening knows my story, it's been about overcoming perfectionism for the last number of years. And so I've had to use so many tools on myself, like worked with different coaches. And so I literally light up when I see someone else start to get it, like that they feel empowered and that they feel like they're, first of all, worth it, that they have a message, they have a product of value. I mean, you're building websites for musicians. All musicians need a website, and many musicians don't know how to make their own. I remember struggling in quarantine in Canada in my parents' trailer. Did I ever tell you this, that I built the first TFA website when I was in
You
quarantine?
did.
Yeah, I remember because we ended up changing over our Instagram and the website at the same time, and we got a
Yep.
new color palette. We just, all of our content changed. I think I went through like this neon phase with our Instagram, and then I went through the kind of like orange phase. And so I was working with a business coach. I still am actually. And then they do digital media services. So then I think Deanna and I were just like at the point, like, okay, we really want to step up our game and take, you want to be taken seriously, and that comes with presenting yourself in a professional way. And that's kind of also an example of like how we like to help our musicians in the social media sprint. Because if you want to be taken seriously and be seen as someone who has an authority and you're an expert in your area, then you want your social media to be the place where when people find you, they're like, wow, who is this? They have confidence. They know what they're talking about. They have something to say. They have a message to share. And that's like we're doing the sprint right now. We have new groups starting up for our social media program. And that's where we really help musicians. Like, who are you as an artist? What is the message that you want to share? Who is the target audience that you want to reach? And let's make a content strategy so that it's that repeatable branding over and over. When people find your page, they know what they're going to anticipate, what they can expect from your content and who you are. And so I think the website is like an extended version of that. But it was such a big flag for me when you said, because of your rebrand, I started paying attention because I was like, oh, so this investment was worth it, because that investment was like a few thousand euros for us. And, you always hesitate. You're like, oh, well, it's good enough as it is. Like, we don't need to really invest in this. So kind of parallel to you investing in coaching, which I'd like to get back to because you've had some great success from your website business already. Can you talk a little bit about like the journey into owning your new business as a pianist? You also have this other business building websites, and now you're being profitable.
Right. So how I started was really just as a hobby. And during COVID, I was doing a lot of little things here and there. And I see that musicians really need help. So
Don't
that's
we
where
all?
I know, right? And
With
it just
everything.
happened. That's something that I always like to do. So when I redesign musicians' website, people notice. And sometimes we think, oh, people don't pay attention, but people do.
Yeah,
And
right.
if I decided not to invest in myself, I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing right now, right? Because we cannot do everything by ourselves. And
Yeah.
that's one thing I learned. I need to outsource, I need to ask for help. So yes. So that's where,
Yeah. In the beginning of our coaching sessions, it was just literally there's a lot of elements of just getting organized. Like, I mean, I had a call today with someone and they've like got a million ideas and they're looking at coming into the mastermind. It's like, where do I start? I've got all these ideas. I've got all these strengths and skills. How do I even get going? So for you, we were really creating your offer, like the basic website, the more advanced, like what is your target? Who is your target audience? How do you write a message that's clear to them? I know we worked a lot on your messaging and really
Mhm.
targeting the right people. Talk about some of the referrals that have come in and the recent projects that you've had.
So that was one of the things I was saying, that I redesigned a website. And so people start seeing this.
Mm,
And that's how I start getting referrals because, the music world is really small,
yeah,
right?
that's
And
true.
so when you look, you're like, oh, who did this?
Mm,
So people contact me, they'll be like, hey, I saw you did this. can you help us? So we start talking. So yeah.
That's awesome. So how are you balancing the website business and your teaching? And, if you're pursuing any performance opportunities, I know you also work at a school. Like, how do you handle all of that mix?
Well, that's why I'm in the mastermind.
I did not
Um,
ask you to say that. That was voluntary.
yeah. Well, no,
You are,
seriously.
you are in the mastermind. It's good that we say that too, because we just had a great call today. It was so awesome.
When we started, that was my first thing, right? Talk about how to manage time better. Um, I have to get the website out at a certain time, and we have the podcast. We have, I have to go teach. So there's so many different things, and I'm still learning how to have a better system, right?
Yeah. Speaking of systems, I mean, I mentioned it already at the beginning of the episode, but I'd love to hear your thoughts on how we have managed to work together and be so consistent. And like, what are some things that we've done that have been successful? Because we didn't miss a single week. We were releasing every 2 weeks for the first year. But like with my schedule, I mean, I had a bazillion concerts. You're teaching all the time. You're running around. You were in Vermont for a piano camp. Like you're doing stuff. How did we do this? Because I know so many musicians are listening to this and they've got 1,000 things going on and maybe they have dreams and new projects that they'd like to start, but they're like, literally, there is no time.
So we have a system where at a certain time, I need all the materials.
Yep.
If we don't have anything, I will, basically I harass you nonstop.
That's true.
Say, hey,
that's true.
I
In
need
a very
this.
kind way. I never felt actually harassed.
That's why we, at the very beginning, I said we can't do everything by ourselves, right?
Yeah.
So I think that's my role. When we start doing this, I said, okay, we need to get this done this way.
Mm-hmm.
So we can have episodes out every, being consistent. I think that's the key.
Yeah. And for example, you asked me to work 4 episodes out so that we would have backlog in case something went wrong, which it did. Do you want to share what happened recently?
Yeah. So I think you had a concert.
Yeah, I did.
And it
was like a Tuesday.
And I said, Michelle, we really need something. So he said, okay. I'll record after my concert. So it was at 1 a.m. You did it. You're so proud. I was so happy, and I think next day I tried to import it, trying to, do my work. I was like, why is there no sound?
Yeah.
Anyway, so we had a little.
So I got a 3 a.m. SOS.
Yeah. But because we have something in the bank, right? We were able to keep pushing it. We just throw that away and then just keep moving on. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. No, I think definitely the team aspect of us working together. Also, the system that you're mentioning for like other musicians wanting to bring on things, like you need to make it simple and repeatable. And I think for us, it was like we just kept making it more simple and simple. Like in the beginning, you were asking me for like every guest speaker's headshot and bios, and then I would have to email them, and then they would email me, and then I'd send it to you. And then eventually you just started going like directly to their sites, not even asking them, and like just taking their headshot and bio, right? Then now we have content. Like I'm so proud of this because I see so many other podcasts and they have great episodes and they want to do short form content to drive people to the podcast, but it just doesn't happen because there's not a system behind it. So we figured out quickly, you send now the transcript, you harass me to highlight it, which I've gotten better at. I'm more on top of that. Then we send that over to our social media girls and they make the clips. I've taught them how I'd like them to make them look. They put the captions on. They used to send it to me for approval. Now it just goes out. I taught them my editing style. I taught them what I want to see. I taught them how to start a social media post with a good hook. In the beginning, it was a little bit more slow. And now I'm like, no, you got to start with like the most important piece of the content and things that I've learned from watching people like Gary Vee or all the social media training. And so that's gotten so much better. And then they write a caption that's about that. Then they add the other guest speakers collaborator. I mean, we've had some big names on the podcast this year, like Deanna Braywick, for example, and her episode's been the highest downloaded one. We ended up making 4 reels with her in it. Her fan base knows her. They respect her so much. And this has given us big visibility where like she accepted a collab reel with us. And then we're getting seen by so many more people. And all of this has happened like, I'm just so proud because all I have to do is I do the 30-minute conversation and then I'm literally hands off and you guys handle it so well. And then, I'll open my phone and I'm like, oh, there's another piece of content that went out. Like it is so beautiful. So I just really believe in outsourcing, delegating, bringing people into your team. I could never do this podcast by myself. It never would have happened. And if I was doing it, I certainly wouldn't have Instagram posts going out about it, or else I'd be living on my phone even more than I am.
I think one other thing that you also talk about is having the system,
Yeah.
and you have to trust the system.
Right.
I'm a person that I need to control everything, and I
Mm.
learned not to,
Mm-hmm.
right? So I kind of, once I'm done my part, I just hand it over to you and, to the social media girls, and they do amazing job. If it's like 5 years ago, I wouldn't be able to do it
Oh, really?
because I want to see every single part. I need to make sure every single part is right.
That's interesting.
But now, because I guess we have the trust, I was just doing my part. I just hand it back to you
Yeah.
and hands off. So
Yeah.
I think that's why now everything is really more consistent. We have all the reels come out.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, which is great because now we're scaling this year. Like we're going to twice the amount of episodes. So I've been a little bit intimidated this year because every Friday I'm like, oh man, like we need to have something ready. So now I've started booking guests. I'm booked for the next 3 weeks, I think, with people like 2 or 3 times a week because then I know that we'll be out. But I've had to also think and plan ahead a little bit because we've doubled our output. And I love that you're talking about being less controlling. Like I have been a controlling person in the past. It's something I'm still having to work on sometimes, but I've also really let go with stuff like social media content. Like I don't write the captions. I used to go through and like in the beginning when I trained Constantina and Puck, I told them like use these emojis, use these words. This is how Michelle would say it. Like I want it to sound like me and I want it to be my thoughts, but they're taking my thoughts from the video script. So like I've already spoken it from myself. It's not like they're writing it themselves. They're just like translating it. That really helped me because I'm like, okay, this is definitely in the right atmosphere of how I would have said it. And even if the wording isn't exactly correct, I'm going to stop nitpicking because even with my own content, like Constantina makes my Instagram content. And in the beginning, I'd like be sending back and forth edits with her on stuff like B-roll videos. And then finally I'm like, Michelle, wake up. Like this isn't important. Like it's simply just to get your visibility up. And then the engagement is me like talking to people and actually nurturing my fans and my community. So that's been really helpful for me too. Just like letting go stuff that doesn't actually matter.
I think as a pianist, I think that's our traits, right? We want to
Maybe.
be fully control. But I thought it was interesting because now I know what's behind the scenes. But sometimes I'm like, how are you posting reels, but then you are traveling
Yeah.
or you're flying? I mean,
I'm like
it's
on a
just amazing.
plane. Yeah.
Right. But it's just amazing. Even when you're here, I see that you have an idea, you just send it over right away. Yeah, just amazing. Like learning that it's possible to handle so many different things and trust the system.
Yeah. And I mean, you can always upgrade the system. You can always tweak the system. Like Deanna and I just made some decisions today, for example, about how the mastermind, how to improve it, improve scheduling. So the system is in place until you change it for the better, and then we need to communicate that, of course, to the team. And it took her and I like quite a long time to figure out what the best decision was. Because figuring it out as you go. And you're also listening to the people, like we have 8 people in the mastermind right now. We're like, okay, what's most helpful for everyone? Like, how can we serve people the best? What do they need? And like, as you mentioned earlier, like today's call was so good. People are just bringing what they're most passionate about, what they're really working on. It's an open and safe place, high level career strategy, but also just like real authentic artists who are looking to share their purpose. And we love so much working with that. So we need systems in place so that we can accomplish the purpose. And if we don't have a good system in place, then we're not free to do what we're called to do. I love that you notice that like I'll get an idea and I'll just whip it off. And that's exactly how I am. Like I'll just shoot it off to Constantina or Puck or a concert text comes in from someone and I just pass it along to Puck and she puts it in my calendar and she books the hotels and the trains and I don't need to think about it anymore. And then my brain's free to like go find the next bagel with you. So
Right. I mean, it's a lot of things that you talk about in the podcast, in your solo podcast, all the things that you talk about what you do, you're actually doing in real life.
yeah.
You actually practice everything that you talk about. And I witnessed everything when you're here. It was incredible. It was a lot of fun to see that. Oh yeah, you talk about it, and also you're doing it.
That's funny. You didn't tell me this when we were in person, so I'm learning new things now.
Well, I mean, everything was happening so quickly.
So fast. Right? I mean, we did like 20 things a day. New York is the place where dreams come true. I just know it. Like from sunup to sundown, I was running around everywhere. I also wanted to just really highlight, I had to overcome a lot of personal limiting beliefs to do this podcast, and you really encouraged me. So can you just speak to a little bit of like, you kind of coached me to step into this when I was having a low moment. Like, how did you do that?
Well, first of all, podcast is not easy, right? I think we have to look at a podcast in a different angle. A lot of people are looking to use podcasts as a revenue.
Mm, right. It's true. I mean, it's supposed
Yeah,
to be towards your target audience that they can come into your world.
exactly. But that's my point, is that people think that can be a revenue coming in, but
Mhm.
it's actually not, because I think the podcast is the best advertisement that any one of us can use,
Yeah.
right? There are a lot of people you connected with because they listen to the
Yes.
podcast.
So
And that
many.
is actually what the podcast is supposed to be, right? Because you reach people. That's the same thing that you tell us, oh, you listen to this great podcast, they talk about this and that.
Yeah.
But there's so many steps that we're taking, right? We just started last year. The only main concern for me is not to miss any episodes.
Mm-hmm.
If we can be consistent, then we can go to the next step. And I would not agree to do weekly if I didn't think it's going to work.
There were specifically a few times, though, when I was like, I don't have this in me. And then you
At the
sent,
very beginning, yeah,
yeah,
a little bit.
yeah,
But, like you always tell us, when we start something, have something better than nothing. And I think that after a few episodes, you get more comfortable.
yeah, that's true.
So yeah, I mean, it was great because we are just keep going higher and higher, going up and up, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So otherwise, I wouldn't agree to do weekly, because weekly is a lot of work.
Okay.
But I know we need to get to weekly to reach more people.
Yes.
Because if you
Impact.
think about it, we started April, that's only 23. So now we're going to double that. So hopefully we can do 60.
Mm-hmm.
No, my
Did
math
you
is
say
not
April?
good.
You meant
Anyway,
January. We
I
started
think we
January.
started late March.
Really?
Yes, because we start recording earlier, but we didn't really push it out until late
Oh,
March.
that's true. And the first episode was 9 minutes. Yeah, you're right. But I just wanted to say, like, you really encouraged me in some points. Also, thank you for going to weeklies, because I didn't know this. So I appreciate
No,
your,
I think it's you encourage me, I encourage you. I think that's
Yeah.
why we work together.
Yeah. So talk to me about our strategy to protect my inner critic in the beginning with numbers. What did I ask you?
You said, don't tell me the numbers.
Yeah.
I don't want to know. Well, which is true, because we all obsessed with, I mean, I was looking at it almost every week. I think at the time, I can't remember exactly what you said, but you just wanted more episodes out and then we can look at the numbers later.
Yeah, I
don't
think I
remember
said
what
for
you
the
said.
first
Yeah.
6 months, I don't want to hear anything about numbers, because I was so scared of having my brand new project like be crushed if I was like, no one's listening.
I see the changes is that when you start talking about podcasts in the newsletter,
Mm-hmm.
at the very beginning, when the newsletter goes out, I see the number goes up.
Yeah. That's another huge shout out to Puck. I mean, that's Puck doing the newsletter for us. She takes the transcript, she puts it into the newsletter, she sends out the links. They're all pre-scheduled. I mean, that's all her. So, I mean, again, talking about systems and hands off, like the content's good, but then to get the numbers behind it, it needs to be promoted. So we promote it through the short form content and then the newsletter.
Right. I'm just excited to see what can we do in this coming year with a weekly.
Oh man, me too.
Yeah.
You just told me that we hit 3,000 downloads this first year, which is, I mean, I think that sounds great. I know in the beginning, the first episode had like 50, and I was like, good thing I didn't know until 6 months in when the numbers were higher, because if I thought only 50 people are listening and I told everyone on my Instagram stories and, I was like, oh no, I would have been totally discouraged. I want to know for you, what was one of your highlight episodes this year?
Boy, there's so many. It's not really fair for me to say because I listen to every single episode at least 3 to 5 times.
I know, but that's why you know which ones are your favorite. Chris Still was amazing. I remember Chris Still's
Yes, I mean
story, yeah.
that episode turned into a
coaching.
session.
He was coaching me on my practicing trauma. Okay, what's one that we're like, you think about, it comes back to mind often, let's say.
I think was the one with branding.
Peter Schoendewaard.
Peter.
Yeah.
Yes.
He's my colleague at Rotterdam.
He was talking about branding in a very interesting way.
Yeah, Peter has such a beautiful way of talking about artist branding, which helped me a lot. He talks about using words, actions, and visuals. If anybody hasn't heard that episode, I highly encourage you to go back and listen to it. And that helped me so much. And then I've been teaching a lot on artist branding. I just got accepted to go speak at the Classical Next conference in May in Berlin, which is like apparently one of the biggest classical music conferences in the world. So I'm a guest speaker and I'll be speaking about building your own brand as an artist. So I'm really excited. And like a lot of those principles came from my work with Peter. He teaches the minor branding at Coder's University. So I also wanted to say, to your point about inspiring guests, like I didn't realize how much the podcast would open doors for me to be able to talk to people with so much expertise and influence. I mean, I had a professor on from McGill. I had Angela Miles Beeching come on. Deanna Braywick. I mean, so many wonderful people, experts in their fields, getting these conversations and then being introduced to their audiences as well. I mean, I've just felt so privileged, and I didn't realize that that's what the podcast would do.
Dr. Heidi Begay, she talked about how the podcast, you just have to be patient with it.
Yeah, her and her husband own a podcast production studio.
Right.
Red
And
House.
so she gave a lot of insights.
Yeah, she's
talking about
great.
how you need to be patient, and I also learned enough from that because that kind of aligned with what my thoughts were about podcasts, right? You just have to be patient. And
Didn't she say that she's done like over 300 episodes or something? And they had 200,000 downloads, something crazy like that. Like it's so inspiring to listen to her speak.
right. So yeah, I mean, like you were saying, that how this opens the door for you. And, I'm excited to see how this coming year is going to bring.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you've already shared so much about what you've learned about being in TFA, being with the mastermind. Is there anything else that I didn't ask you about? Hey, I asked you in New York how I was doing as an interviewer, if I had good questions. And guess what he said to me? He goes, terrible.
Terrible.
He's like,
Terrible. And I think that after you, maybe I would say 4th or 5th episodes in, you're more comfortable. Everything just started rolling. It was really nice.
Yeah, and I'm always open to feedback. I mean, I'm constantly asking people for feedback, and I've only gotten good things so far, which I guess is also feedback. But yeah, being more comfortable for sure, and asking interesting questions, I think that helps people unlock, because not everyone is so comfortable coming on camera. I know we've worked a lot with you too about being on camera with your content. Actually, that's the next workshop I want to do with the Fearless Artist, is how to be comfortable speaking on camera, because I think so many musicians can learn those skills that would make it more comfortable for them.
Right. So I mean, the fact that I'm agreed to be here right now, it's a lot, because I usually is behind, right?
Yes, that's
I mean,
true.
I'm happy to be here because I think that to talk about this process, right? It's great.
Yeah, I think it's important. And I think it's also important that people listening understand that it's not just me, because I'm the face. TFA's Deanna comes on from time to time with content, but mostly it's me talking on camera. So we really try and make sure to show hey, we're a team. There's a lot of people. Michelle would have burned out a long time ago if it was just her. And yeah, it's a blast. It's a real privilege to work with you. So thank you for everything you've done for the podcast, for TFA. Thank you for being part of the mastermind. Do you have an action point? You know how we finish our episodes. One thing that people can take away from this episode?
Consistency.
I
think that's what we've been focusing on, right? Be consistent.
Yeah.
And we're seeing the results.
Yeah, that's true. How am I going to be consistent? I just made my 2025 goals today with ChatGPT, and it blew my mind, and it was extremely helpful. And then I asked it also to make a daily itinerary based on those goals, and that was also very helpful. Well, Pokie, thanks for your time, and
Of course,
I will
thank you.
talk to you probably later today, because I will need to send you something.
Okay.
All right. Thanks everybody for listening, and make sure to go check out Pokie on Instagram. It's PH Media Studio. And you can follow the Fearless Artist Mastermind on Instagram. And thanks again, as always, for listening. Be fearless.
Thank you for listening to the Fearless Artist Podcast. If you found today's episode inspiring, hit that subscribe button and don't forget to share this podcast with a friend. To join our membership or one of our coaching programs, visit our website at thefearlessartistmastermind.com.
This episode was produced by Pokie Huang at PH Media Studios in New York City. We're Deanna and Michelle, encouraging you to create your own opportunities and to go after what you want. You have what it takes to build the career of your dreams. Until next time, be fearless.